Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alastair.
And this fortnight, we are here to talk about, after doing Absolute Batman a few episodes back, we are moving across the streets to Absolute Wonder Woman by Kelly Thompson and Hayden Sherman. And then we will be talking about the winner of this year's Oscar for Best International Feature. It's Sentimental Value. But before all of that, Alastair, what else have you done?
Well, this is going to be another instalment of Alastair admits to only recently watching something everyone probably assumed I watched a long time ago. Continuing my path through the Studio Ghibli films that I've not seen, as they're all on Netflix, I've watched Princess Mononoke, which is, by some measures, it depends on who you ask, I guess, the sort of best regarded or a lot of people's favourite of the Studio Ghibli films. It's pretty old, 1997, coming up to nearly 30 years old. Yeah, which is terrifying when you put it that way. Yeah, it's one of those ones and it's probably not going to be a really radical review in that, the thing that everyone says is really, really good is really, really good. It's got a great story, it's beautifully animated, some interesting characters. I really should have watched this years ago.
Pretty sure I saw this on someone's laptop, possibly at a party or something. It was quite late and I'd had a few drinks and I don't really remember anything about it. So all told, rather than counting it as a film I've seen, I should probably watch it again.
It's the one with the giant wolf.
That doesn't ring any bells at all. I should probably watch it again.
Oh, fair enough, yeah. It is really, really good and certainly stand up to a rewatch. It's got a beautiful range of characters that's well animated. I mean, similar to Spirited Away that we discussed before and The Boy and the Herring. Like quite a lot of Miyazaki movies, there's quite a lot of spiritual elements to it. There's a lot of mythical creatures. This one is very much set in a fantasy world. So it's, I suppose a bit different from Spirited Away or The Boy and the Herring, which is more about if you fall through the cracks in our world and you end up in this other world. This is very much, people who live in a world of spirits and monsters and things like that. It really brings this whole range of characters to life, from giant wolves and boars and some, pretty terrifying monsters through to cute little forest spirits and things like that. So once again, the amazing character design and use of supernatural beings is very much in presence, which I appreciated a lot.
Okay, so we're into full-on fantasy territory rather than magical realism or urban fantasy or whatever else you class Studio Ghibli films as.
Yeah, definitely. Full of fantasy territory, and that, takes place in a mythical realm with characters who live there all the time and are au fait with the presence of spirits and things like that. Similar again as what I said with Spirited Away is that I wonder how many of these are actually inspired by Japanese myth and folklore, and I guess how many are the filmmaker's own creation. I get the feeling that this is probably a bit more rooted in folk traditions and actual spiritual beliefs. It's very much about nature and the spirit of nature. The plot of the film very much is about the sort of, natural world is being encroached on by humans who are destroying the forest, chopping it down, building their industry, and then the sort of the nature spirits that want to fight back, and there's the people who want to express or live in a more harmonious way with nature. It's often held up as a, environmentalist film, a film about ecology, a film about our relationship with nature, even like a solar punk film, although that's a bit complicated in that in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't, but definitely the sense of nature and nature being connected with spirit is very much a part of this film. And also this kind of sense of, places are imbued with spirits and supernatural life, which sounds similar to a lot of Shinto beliefs that are a religion that has been observed in Japan throughout the years and is still very popular to this day. So I get the feeling, although, I'm a long way from an expert, that this is possibly a bit more informed by Japanese society than some of the others,
My one lingering vague memory of it is the sort of nature-inspired fantasy or monster designs. Lots of big creatures inspired by animals and plants, I think I remember. Or I could be talking shit.
No, that's absolutely, yep. There's a lot of talking animals, these great spirits of some animals, like bits involving a large boar. Obviously there's a wolf. There's a couple of wolves actually that turn up throughout the film, and they're quite an important part of it. There's a deer as well. Although the main characters are humans, and again, humans with a sort of supernatural bent to them. So again, it's very much taking place in fantasy. It is a really sort of vivid evocation of this fantastic world that's been created. Again, like a lot of Studio Ghibli films, it's beautifully brought to life.
It does definitely sound like something which would look absolutely amazing, all animated up in typical Studio Ghibli style, yes. This probably is one I should actually prioritise in my very slow, spanning over years quest to finally watch some Studio Ghibli, on top of all the other things I have to finally watch.
Yeah. Well, this one I would strongly recommend anyone who's not seen it. You can see an evolution in the animation style, I guess, definitely from this on to Spirited Away. Spirited Away was a few years later, and I think more of an international success. But obviously, there's a lot of people who are fans of Ghibli, and this is one that they go back through the timeline of. I think, a lot of people reckon it's the best. I think I went on IMDb, and someone's created an article that is all the Studio Ghibli films sorted in order of IMDb score, and I believe, Princess Mononoke was like number 1, possibly Spirited Away number 2. I had to jump into it, obviously, if it's the most well-respected of the kind of, I don't know, it's a very large number of films they've done over about a sort of 40-year period.
Yeah, if you ask me to guess which 2 Studio Ghibli films are the most widely acclaimed, it probably would be those 2. I've seen a few other random ones because I think my partner was just showing me the ones she likes. I think I saw Kiki's Delivery Service, I think it's called.
That's another well-regarded one. I think,
that was fun. That was cute.
Yeah, and there's My Neighbour Totoro.
I've seen the stage production, but not the film.
Yeah, there's the stage production that's on the West End of London right now. It's very good. I can recommend that. There's Howl's Moving Castle, based on a Welsh novel, actually, that one. What else? Oh, there's loads.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're not going to list them all, are we?
No, I was going to say there's Wizard of Earthsea, adaptation of the Ursula K. Le Guin novel. There's a lot out there. I'm pretty sure they're all on Netflix. Anyway, it's going to take me a while to get through them all. I don't know how doggedly I'm going to stick to this, because there's a lot of films and there's a lot of other stuff to watch. But I did really like this, as well as obviously being a really interesting film about Japanese culture and an important part of film history. I did like it's one of those films that it's not sort of overtly political, but at the same time is very political in the sense that, about our relationship with nature and the spirit of nature that's crushed by humans' rampant sort of greed and anger and desire. And there's a lot of really interesting political stuff as well. It's quite a feminist film, obviously, with the eponymous character as sort of warrior woman princess. She's very badass and very cool. So there's a lot of interesting political stuff to dive into here.
Yeah. Obviously I haven't seen it, but I assume for a film that's this acclaimed after this long, but it's probably got quite a lot of subtext going on.
Yeah, a lot going on for it, yeah. And I like to say Miyazaki's animation style is beautiful, bringing the kind of spirits and the natural landscape to life, which obviously reinforces the kind of political message about looking after nature and trying to find a way to live in harmony with nature. Yeah, so that's another Studio Ghibli film I should have seen. We'll see how long I keep this intermittent segment running. But Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, HBO Max has finally launched in Britain, and many people are on there watching The Pit, the hotly acclaimed medical drama. I am not here to talk about The Pit because I've only seen the first 8 episodes of it, so I'll probably at least finish a whole season before I try and pretend to have cohesive, meaningful opinions. But what I have managed to get through on HBO Max is the other thing I was excited to finally watch on there, which is the most recent 5th season of Harley Quinn, the Batman animated spin-off. Well, yeah, the sort of Batman-adjacent animated show about Harley Quinn, the Joker's former clown girlfriend sidekick, finally deciding that he's an abusive bastard and she's going to go it alone as a villain and indeed as a person. It's been running for 5 seasons now. The first 4 were on 4OD at some point, the on-demand branch of Channel 4, but as those of you who are in Britain may know, that is a terrible network which puts things up in a really annoying intermittent way and then often deletes them after a month, especially when it gets the rights to American shows. So yeah, watching Harley Quinn on there was a complete pain, and they never bothered showing the 5th season, so I'm happy to finally get to watch it. And yes, over the last 4 seasons, basically, Harley Quinn, having ditched the Joker, has gotten together with fellow long-term Batman villain Poison Ivy. They've become a supervillain power couple, and after spending 4 seasons causing increasing chaos in Gotham City, in this 5th season, they decamp to Metropolis to seek a new scene and get out of the rut they feel their relationship is in, and proceed to rampage through the Daily Planet, LexCorp, every other Metropolis trope you can think of, and just cause chaos in a fun way, whilst still ultimately being kind of good, well-meaning, slightly violent people. And yeah, it's fun. It's still a very good animated comedy. I think you could possibly argue that they had more or less finished the actual meaningful narrative thrust of this show by the end of season 3, when we got to the end of the very slight will they won't they with Poison Ivy and Harley, and past the sort of will they make the relationship work thing. Now they're one of these sort of established couples that they're clearly not ever going to break up, because as they literally referenced several times in the show, the fans would just go nuts. So at this point, for the last couple of seasons, it is a bit, the characters just do some stuff, but it's pretty entertaining stuff. This season I think feels a bit more focused and emotionally resonant than perhaps the previous season did, and yeah, seeing them bounce off the Superman tropes after 4 years of rinsing the Gotham Batman stuff is quite fun.
Yeah, that sounds good. I know this show is very well regarded. And also it's one of those shows that it's recommended to me by people who aren't, I don't know, superhero completists who don't want to consume every, adaptation of superhero stuff. It's one of those ones that people just seek out on its own right, it sounds really good. Yeah, I do need to watch this. Sounds like also a really good idea. Yeah, relocate to a new location to inject some fresh life into the show, whilst also bring in, some new characters and stuff, and new situations, I guess, by bringing in stuff from wider Superman lore.
Yeah, no, it's fun. They've really sort of reshaped it a bit to make it more of a Superman story. They're very much dealing with, aliens coming from space with weird sci-fi death rays and stuff, rather than just weird people in crazy costumes like you get in Gotham. So they're very much sort of taking the view that this is, thrusting Harley Quinn into a Superman story, which does kind of work. But yeah, this show's very good in its own right. Crucially, you don't need to watch anything else to understand it. It's just its own specific take. They've got, a good sense of humour and an enjoyable amount of irreverence and swearing.
Yeah, people seem to really have gravitate towards this take on Harley Quinn. I guess having a likeable main character, I suppose, is essential for a show.
Yeah. It's definitely become an overriding take. I think the Poison Ivy Harley Quinn relationship has kind of found its way back into the comics as well. It seems to increasingly be just one of the standard takes on the character. So yeah, no, they definitely succeeded. And also their take on, they've got their own take on a few different Batman villains. Their take on Bane seems to have particularly stuck as this sort of lovable idiot workaday loser who just continues to try his best and just always ends up a bit of a crestfallen sad sack, whilst occasionally approaching things in a very supervillainous way, like vowing vengeance on various call centre operatives and so on, whilst doing the silly voice where he sounds like he's yelling against a bit of metal. So yeah, no, he's a fun character. Crucially, he is one of the few characters from the Gotham side, other than Harley and Ivy, who just turns up in Metropolis to continue being in the show. I mean, obviously there is a reason in the story, but the real reason is because he's the breakout character other than Harley and Ivy, and we want him to keep being in it.
Yeah, he's popular. Yeah, I remember you saying last time we discussed this in the podcast, how funny their take on Bane was, which I suppose is probably quite good after Dark Knight Rises, I guess, taking maybe the Mexican wrestler guy a bit too seriously.
Yeah, I mean, as those of us who were proper Nightfall fans in the 90s will tell you, Bane was originally a fairly dead serious character, despite how stupid he looks. So yeah, there is a part of me that's still yearning for that dead straight adaptation of Nightfall, but I'm still able to find this one funny because it's just hilarious. Even when they occasionally have a slow episode in this show, there's normally a few good Bane moments or Bane lines. He's a fun guy. The poor bastard.
And does this consistently maintain the quality from previous seasons?
As I say, if anything, I think it's a bit of a step up on season 4, which I think suffered even more from a sort of, what now? Are we still going? We need to make something else up now that we've basically resolved most of the storylines type problem.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm glad it's consistently maintaining the quality.
Yeah, I fully blame the annoying duo of Channel 4 and HBO Max for the fact that I haven't seen this till 2 years after it aired in the States. There's still no sign of a renewal for Season 6, so this may actually be the last season. And, it does have an ending. It's a bit of a yes and no ending. It's a sort of we could do more, but just in case ending. So I guess maybe they didn't know if they'd be renewed. Although I have seen them giving a few interviews saying they'd still like to be renewed. No sign of it yet, so who knows? It might be finished.
I guess as it's maybe more of a comedy, you can do those, I don't know, ambiguous endings or ones where it's this is a sort of stopping point, but not necessarily conclusively wrapping everything up to the point where it's clearly an ending. Then to be fair, Dexter did 2 endings and it's going to be back for a new season this year, so there's really no limit.
Well, yeah, I mean, its main character are this couple who it's clearly, deeply invested in, so ultimately all everyone really wants is for their love to endure, and so if the ending is always going to be their love endures, then, you can always make another season.
It's got that comic book superhero soap opera thing, which is, always a new thing can be happening. There can always be new plot injected into any scenario.
Oh yeah, they've got a very good eye for coming up with weird things to do with random characters. And if you enjoy seeing niche characters from the Batman especially adjacent comic sphere, then yes, there's a lot of those cameos in Harley Quinn. They're very comics literate, which is probably one reason why this is so popular with both the regular people and the nerds. It's just good fun. They also made a spin-off about the character Kite-Man called Kite-Man. Hell yeah.
Kite-Man?
Kite-Man, yeah, he's in the first couple of seasons as Poison Ivy's vaguely well-meaning but also massive loser boyfriend who she sort of dates a bit till she realises her love for Harley Quinn. And then he gets his own show and it's all right. Again, showing that they know what side their bread's busted on. One of the main supporting characters in this show is, one of them is Kite-Man's new girlfriend and the other one is Bane, again. If you just want to watch the show to see more of their take on Bane, then it's worth it just for that. But the actual storyline outside of Bane and his silly interludes, I don't know, it doesn't have the juice, as they say. It just feels a bit lacking in something.
So only watch Kite-Man if you're really excited for more Bane content or more of this similar tone, I suppose.
Yeah, more of the broad general tone and a lot more Bane. If that excites you, if you're a big fan who's going through withdrawals because they're refusing to renew this, then yeah, you may as well watch the Kite-Man show, but it's not as good.
I suppose, and also if you're waiting for another big delay. I did think it was a while since you last discussed this. I didn't realise, that we've been held back from 2 years from what was released in America.
Yeah, for the record, if you have wanted to watch this at some point, you being Alastair or you being anyone listening to this podcast, then it is now available on HBO Max in a nice, straightforward, here's 5 seasons, you can just watch them way, rather than whatever bullshit Channel 4 were doing, so fill your boots.
Next up, this episode, we will be discussing another DC property. This time, it's Absolute Wonder Woman, written by Kelly Thompson and illustrated by Hayden Sherman. In a similar vein to Absolute Batman, which we discussed recently, this is a new series of comics from DC, reimagining the character of Wonder Woman with a new origin and telling a new story. We have read the entire first volume of this comic, 7 issues. Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. It definitely felt a bit more regular superhero comics than Absolute Batman, I think. I don't think it was going quite as hard for the extremeness and the big stylistic silliness, but I did think it was a very solid, enjoyable introduction of the hero, the supporting cast. It definitely has a very new, distinct take on Wonder Woman, which it's very keen to walk us through, with a sort of solid grounding in myth and witchcraft. The basic pitch, I think I can more or less summarise here without spoiling, is that this version of Diana was consigned to hell as a little girl, and has grown up there, raised by a witch, and now has some spells and a slightly more angry occult edge. Although they're still very much adhering to the fundamental Wonder Woman tenet that one of her big powers is her compassion, If you describe this take on Wonder Woman, you could think that they're really going to edgelord it in a similar way to they did with Absolute Batman. But I think the fundamentals of the character are still in there, which I think is probably the key to pulling off one of these revivals, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my core takeaways is that, despite a very radically different setting of hell, a lot of the story takes place in hell. Yeah, they managed to keep the core of the character the same. Yeah, I guess Wonder Woman's not a character I know a lot about. Certainly not in the way that, I guess like Batman and Superman, but I suppose you can absorb a lot of Batman and Superman lore through cultural osmosis. But this feels to me like quite a different take on Wonder Woman from things we've seen before. It certainly feels very different to what we've seen in the recent films. Yeah, again, I don't know how accurate that is based on what's been written in the comics over the years, but this did feel like they were trying something quite radically different.
Yeah, I mean the comics, I'm not, to be honest, a Wonder Woman scholar either, but I think the broad thrust of the original comics outside the Absolute universe is pretty similar to the recent film. Well, the first recent film, she's raised on Paradise Island, she leaves Paradise Island to come to man's world, and then has a bit of a fish out of water thing going on. And all the hell stuff is very much the big change for the Absolute version.
Yeah, and the fact there aren't any other Amazons. She's the last of the Amazons, or at least as far as we know, and then she's been sent by Zeus to an island in hell to be raised, possibly as some kind of punishment, or possibly as some kind of punishment on the Amazons. It doesn't quite get into that. But Zeus, although it doesn't appear, is very much mentioned as this kind of presence in the background, sort of overlord of this universe, making these big decisions and kind of weaving this meta story that the comic would explore over time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things this book is good at, I think, is having this sense of mythology. There's a lot of talking about legends and a lot of interference from the gods and stuff. It does a good job of summoning up the tone of sort of myths and legends that they're trying to pull from here. I mean, that's not unique to this take on Wonder Woman. She's a character who does interact with that sort of thing, but they are doing a particularly good job of it here. It does feel like quite a coherent mythology.
And I really did like how inspired by ancient Greek religion the story was. There's a lot of well-known characters or creatures. So there's a 2-part story. That's the part 6 and part 7 of this, about Hades himself and his dominion over hell. There's an issue where Prometheus turns up and there's a large part. The basilisk is mentioned. There's other references to things from Greek stories. So if you're interested in those stories and the kind of cultural icons that they are and the kind of impact they've had on our wider culture, then there's a lot of interesting stuff to dig into here. And quite a lot of some of the more gory and darker sides, like they allude to Prometheus having his liver constantly eaten by a giant eagle and things like that, which is, I guess, not the children's version of Greek religion that you get.
Yeah, you're right. They're not edgelording up Wonder Woman herself too much. Well, they have made her general origin and powers, I guess, a bit edgier in some ways, in that she's now a witch. But, as I say, the core of her character is still kind of there, but the broader take on mythology is, I think, a bit messier and bloodier and slightly less maybe sanitised than you've got in some takes on Wonder Woman in the past.
Which did make this feel fresh and original. Yeah, I got the sense that they were doing something different here, and they come up with an original idea. I think this is probably similar to what we said about, or what I said at least about Absolute Batman, is that they seem to have come up with some kind of, actual original idea. Maybe in this case even more apparent. I suppose, we were talking about how Alfred was different before, and how in Absolute Batman, there's a difference in Batman's origin story and things like that. So again, here it seems like the strength of this is that they have come up with a new idea and a new way to tell the story and to explore this character and a new background for the character to make it feel fresh and original on a character that's been around for quite a long time.
Yeah, and I think Kelly Thompson, who's done quite a bit of superhero stuff over the last 5 to 10 years, but I think this is her first book to really break out, I think, has got a very good handle on the sort of superhero dialogue, superhero combat, pacing out these fights and stuff, and sort of slowly revealing her power set and her origin in quite a dynamic, propulsive way. The first 5 issues take place basically over, I think, only a few hours, only this single fight between Wonder Woman and a massive mythological beastie, and the pacing's very good. It doesn't really slack. It does mostly just feel like you've watched a quite compelling film. I mean, a lot of it is intercut with, I guess, flashbacks to her being brought up in hell. This isn't the only thing that's happening, but still, it's very well paced, and there's a lot of very nicely done sort of dialogue to introduce you to characters as they fly by in this action sequence.
Yeah, it did really have the feel of a pilot episode of a TV show, or a first TV show episode that both sets up the characters but wants to have a story in the first episode that builds to a climax and has some action and stuff, and you get to see the character in action rather than just it all being set up. That was really, really good, and I did like the big monster. There was a lot of Cthulhu type references, I felt, in the kind of thing that came out of the sea that had tentacles and was massive and quite disgusting looking. And there was a whole thing about how, if you hear it scream, you're sort of driven to insanity and run towards it to get eaten up. That struck me as quite Cthulhu-esque, so I appreciated that.
Yeah, there's a nice, again, edge of genuine horror as well as the myth stuff in Wonder Woman being raised in hell. They're holding back a bit on really exploring the hell side of the setting. I assume we'll get to that. And again, I think there's a bit of defying expectations in that, in actual fact, a lot of Wonder Woman's youth in hell was actually quite, warm and nurturing, surprisingly. It's one of the things Kelly Thompson does well here, is bringing through this sincere emotion quite quickly with the witch Cersei raising Wonder Woman in hell.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done, and there's a real sense of them as characters and the love she has as a mother for her adopted daughter, and it feels really, really genuine and feels like an accessible mother-daughter relationship, despite the fact it's set in hell and about superheroes and it's got a lot of magic in it. There's also that very relatable everyday element to it, and balancing those two things and making them work together is quite challenging. It works well here.
Yeah, and the art's by, the first 5-issue story is by Hayden Sherman, and the two-parter after that is by Matteo De Lulis, and they're both really good, I think. They're interestingly different. Sometimes in these sort of one artist subbing in for another type setups, they try and find 2 artists with a very sort of broadly similar style, but I think here they've actually allowed them to drift a bit and be a bit different. But yeah, Hayden Sherman's really good. It's less hyper-detailed and pin-uppy than some of the stuff you got in Absolute Batman. It's not as focused on looking awesome. It's very expressive, which is, I guess, very good for the sort of more emotional vibe you get off Wonder Woman. It's a bit more focused on trying to create genuine emotional warmth than perhaps some of Absolute Batman was.
Yeah, I thought the artwork was amazing. I thought the depiction of the gods was very, very good. Whenever they appeared, you got the sense of how otherworldly they were, how powerful they were. Especially there's the two-parter with Hades, but also several other deities that appear before that. And I thought it was a good depiction, because gods and things like that can be hard to depict because you make them look like a person, they just look like everyone else. And obviously it's kind of hard to convey the sort of extra-dimensional or sort of super-powered or divine, I suppose, aspect of gods. But I thought they did it well here and did it very creatively. There's a lot of good character design, and also the monsters looked really good as well. There was they looked suitably unpleasant and nasty, including the big Cthulhu-like one, and the basilisk looked again quite vicious and things like that. So again, really good character design, lots of creativity in the art that I liked a lot.
Yeah, and again, I know you read the comics through the panel by panel app mostly, but yeah. Some great page layouts as well, some really weird shaped panels. I've no idea how that came over in the panel view, but yeah, there's some very odd pages divided up into 3 sections by diagonal lines and weird shapes and panels spinning around the centre and stuff to try and bring across the weird power of the Cthulhu god thing, which is all very entertaining.
Yeah, no, I thought that was good. Yeah, that comes across well. Because the thing is, when you're reading it in panel view, you get the sense of like, it's making my view jump around the page in a slightly like unusual order. And then you're kind of aware that the artist is doing something here. Or even because, again, it's still like a square that's zoomed in, you can see that like the diagonal line that's the border of the shell. So that obviously prompts you to make sure you zoom out and look at the whole page because there's something interesting to see here. And I felt there was a lot of interesting like breaking with panel structure and being a bit creative and a bit different as well. And things like that, it's like, well, you're the comic expert, but it's like really showy writing or editing in that it can work really well, but sometimes it can either be distracting. I can imagine there's a lot of artists who say if you're noticing the panels then something's gone wrong because people should be looking at the story and the art. But then again, there are times when like showy writing or showy editing has its place and can really enhance the story, and I think the same's true here.
Well, yeah, I think because it's such a high-level, big concept, Wonder Woman fighting gods and stuff, weird fantasy effects, and again, the gods descending onto the page, you can get away with some weird layouts and playing with the structure of things to try and indicate that things are getting a bit weird or things are getting a bit extreme. You know, I think a lot of the pages where she's just talking to people are much more conventional straight lines, but yeah, I think he does some interesting things with panel layouts to show when things are, you know, kicking off or going weird.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that worked really well. Yeah. Again, it's an interesting take on it. Yeah, and there's a good selection of familiar characters. The pilot, he's played by Chris Pine in the recent films. Yeah, Steve Trevor, he turns up again in a modern incarnation. Plus there's a range of supporting characters. Yeah, I'm not sure how many of them are new characters or...
Well, there's Etta Candy, who was Lucy Davis in the first film. She shows up. And I think Barbara Minerva, who became the Cheetah in the second film. Although we may have all tried to forget the second film, but she was there. Also turns up.
Yeah, I guess I recognise her because also she's got a Roman goddess for a surname. Yeah, there's some recognisable characters.
It's similar to the Absolute Batman, I guess. Part of what you're doing when you're introducing this is teasing sort of, and here's our new take on these established characters. Where are we going to go with this?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Again, like some of those things were definitely like putting out these characters as basically like, we hear these characters, and then so they've been introduced because it's the sort of pilot episode vibe, and then we'll see where they're going to go. I mean, the final story of the volume, I guess, was like the second story, but it was only 2 issues. Is in hell and doesn't have the human Earth-based characters in them, so we didn't get a lot of them. But also at the same time, I guess it introduces more of the hell characters and more of the mythology and god-based characters, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it balances that stuff going forward. I do need to read more of this. I think there's at least another 6 or so issues up on the DC app. Did you get the little comic strippy stories, the Little Diana ones, with art by Dustin Nguyen?
Yeah, they were on the end. So the version I had, I assume you get 1 per issue, but they were all gathered together right at the end.
Yeah, I read these single issues on the app, so yeah, I had them at the end of the issues.
Yeah, we get them all at the end, so like one after another. Yeah, they were kind of funny and sweet. That was quite a nice little take. Yeah, sort of like a charming comic about Diana being a child. What they bizarrely sort of reminded me of is if you watch the Standalone Complex Ghost in the Shell animated show, each episode also ends with a short about the Tachukomas, which are the sort of tank robot things they have in the show, have been going on a little silly adventure for about 30 seconds. And it's a very similar vibe. And I like that when you've got something very serious and then like a little silly short on the end. Yeah, it's quite a nice tonal palette cleanser or like an aperitif.
Yeah, no, and again, it's nice. It adds this vague sense that, the comic is about, Wonder Woman getting by in hell with the power of love and compassion, refusing to be dragged down into misery. It's a nice take. I enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah. And one thing actually I forgot I did want to say is I really liked, there's a bit when they tell a story, when Cersei's telling a story to Diana, and the art style goes into that resembling ancient Greek pottery.
Yeah.
The sort of orange background with the black sort of 2-dimensional.
Yeah, the lady in the tiger bit towards the end. Yeah.
Yeah. I just really liked how that kind of nod towards the pottery, which is something that if you know something more about ancient Greece, you recognise that a lot. It's maybe a deeper cut than mentioning like Hades or the basilisk or something like that. But yeah, I thought that was really well done and I appreciated that.
Yeah, no, that was lovely. I've read another book by Kelly Thompson and Mattia DeLulis, which was also really good. But yeah, this is really, really great art from him here. Maybe he'll come back next time Hayden Sherman needs a break. I don't know.
Finally, this episode, we will be discussing Sentimental Value, the new film from Joachim Trier. Sisters Nora and Ans reconnect with their estranged father, Gustav, after the death of their mother. Gustav used to be a successful art house filmmaker and is working on a film about his mother that he hopes will be his comeback. After the role is turned down by his daughter Nora, a rising Hollywood star, Rachel Kemp takes the role. We have seen this film on Mubi. It caused a big stir at the London Film Festival last year and went on to win the Best International Production Oscar this year. Nick, what did you think of it?
I thought this was a very nicely made film, very well acted, very nicely written, lots of interactions that were played very well, sort of understated, a sort of real sense of history. It really did feel like you were watching a family with this sort of complex history between them, slowly exploring their feelings. Yep, I was compelled throughout, even though it's a fairly long film, and I often complain about that. Perhaps almost too understated in the end for me. The ending was a bit, was that it? When I was watching it, so I was kind of hoping for things to come to a head a bit more. Maybe I've just watched too many pandering Hollywood movies, I don't know. But yep, no, I've enjoyed it moment to moment. As I say, I think there's a lot of very good writing and acting here.
Yeah, it's quite a subtle film, which I really liked about it, and it's quite focused on relationships and characters' emotional states. Yeah, I suppose it's one of those films that does well at London Film Festival. I thought the subtlety was really very precise, and it's very good at conveying these sort of characters' deep feelings and their emotions and things like that. It's not easy to do this sort of thing on cinema, which to focus so heavily on interpersonal conflict and people's relationships, but this sounds more like the sort of thing they do in the theatre. But this did it in a really emotionally intense way without there being screaming and plates being thrown and things like that, although there are a few big bust ups. So I really like the kind of range of feelings and characters on display here.
No, the characters are all very well defined, the acting's all very good. Stellan Skarsgård especially is great as the filmmaker dad who's a bit of a dick, and Elle Fanning's really good as Rachel Kemp. But that part of the storyline is actually quite weird in that it feels in some ways a bit extraneous, but also it's actually surprisingly good and surprisingly weighty. And to be honest, speaking again about my desire for catharsis at the end, I thought the final scene between the Elle Fanning character and Stellan Skarsgård was probably felt like one of the most emotionally resonant bits of the film for me. That was one of the bits where I felt I did genuinely get a big payoff, which again almost made me feel more weirdly disappointed, but I didn't quite get the same with him and his daughters.
Yeah, I thought she was really, really good. I mean, this film has a really strong cast, like Stellan Skarsgård, who's in so much stuff. We've loved him in June and things like that, but also here he is again playing a slightly more contained character, but also hearing him speaking is a native Norwegian, which is unusual. So I suppose this film is a bit in English and a bit in Norwegian. I'm really bad at the pronunciations and of the Norwegian names. Renate Rensev, I'm not exactly sure on the pronunciation of that. She's amazing playing Nora. Worked with the director before on The Worst Person in the World, which is a really, really good film. Something of a breakout role for her, and I guess brought Joachim Trier's work to the mainstream, which was good. But I think Elle Fanning, especially again, playing a character in a film where English, your spoken language, isn't the main language of the film, and playing this outsider character is again a challenging role. But I thought she worked really well, playing again a movie star in a film about this sort of family drama, and she has this sort of star quality to her, and that whenever she's on screen you're drawn towards her, always looking at her, has this glow to her, and that's I suppose which I guess a celebrity would have in this world of normal people living their sort of normal lives. It does work really well as a piece of interesting casting. She
is really good, but the Norwegian actors playing the two daughters do get a lot of the sort of good, big, emotional stuff as well. The actor playing Nora, especially towards the beginning, I think she gets a lot of quite strong material. Possibly isn't in it as much towards the end, but her emotions are definitely very well depicted. And I liked the actor playing Agnes as well, actually. She, I guess, is playing the less, interestingly troubled sister, but finds a lot to play in the sort of subtleties of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all very well cast, Joachim Trier does get good actors, I guess, because he's, probably must be about the most well-known Norwegian filmmaker of the moment. And it is an interesting way how the sort of two halves of this film fit together. Some of it is very much a family drama and about this sort of family, and it's irrelevant what it is that the family does. But then there's this whole other element of the fact that, their father's a director, and, Nora's an actress, mainly stage actually, but also does, she talks at one point about being in a streaming show and is looking at film. And then there's this whole other aspect of, this Hollywood star coming in and trying to portray their lives and their family, which would be a very odd and surreal thing. It does get across how strange that is as an experience. But also, I guess, it kind of shows how these weird things happen when you've got a life that's both a regular life, but also this kind of creative life, again, the Gustav character has. And also really shows, kind of how separate, in some ways, almost his two lives are, how there's sort of two storylines but intertwined. Like he has a high-flying career where he meets celebrities and engages in discussions about cinema and retrospective of his films. But at the same time, he still lives a regular life. He had a dysfunctional relationship with his wife. He's estranged from his daughters. He's got regular emotional baggage that doesn't come with being a celebrity or an artist. And it kind of does a good job of showing how those one can be quite mundane and one can be quite fancy and glittery, which is interestingly done.
Yeah, no, you're right. The two sections are quite separate, in that you could probably make the film just by having, Gustav cast this American starlet to play his daughter's character in his film, and then just have her, appear occasionally at the side of scenes, or just drop in occasionally so that Nora can sort of feel weird about her. They really didn't have to, make her a character and give her a whole storyline. But the fact that they did bother to do this makes it kind of feel like one of the more unpredictable, interesting bits of the film. Yeah,
and a lot of Joachim Trier's characters are usually very well developed and things like that. I've seen a few of his films, as well as the Worst Person in the World, that again, which was a sort of quarter-life crisis, millennial film. There's sort of a lot of dating stuff in it. Each sort of character or person that she interacts with does feel like very much a three-dimensional person. And then, and some of his other films I highly recommend checking out. There's one called Oslo, 31st of August. That's a really good film. That's quite dark and quite sad. He's done some others as well. His film's really worth diving into if you're interested in some auteur-led cinema.
Yeah, no, as you say, the sort of three-dimensionality of the characters is definitely one of the big selling points of this. All the scenes are really good. There's always a very clear sort of motivation, and there's this awkwardness and unspoken bits of drama between the characters. I guess you could compare it to the drama, which we saw last week. But yeah, there's a lot of sort of that going on where someone says something and you just sort of cringe inwardly at how insensitive it is. Normally it's Gustav doing that. Yeah, it's all very well played, and the characters are very well rounded to make that work in every scene, because it's not as skin-crawlingly cringy as the drama was. It's just these people sort of gently upsetting each other.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of focused on a more warmer view of humanity, and maybe a bit more positive in that. I think, it has some... Well, I don't want to say too much about the ending, but there is a sense of people repairing relationships and kind of growing and healing as people. But, which is nice and things like that, in that it's not depressing at the end.
As I may have mentioned, I found the ending a bit I was somehow hoping for more. I felt like they kind of, I don't know, after spending all this whole film slowly exploring the characters, I felt the ending was a bit sort of, and then they reconciled.
Yeah, this is very much how it ends. So yeah, a lot of his films like this, Joachim Trier's films, are like that, in that the ending feels like an appropriate place for the characters, but I suppose maybe lacks bombast or something like that. I suppose I kind of liked how it was done. I mean, I don't want to say too much about the ending, I suppose, but focusing in on the film itself that was being made as kind of the point that kind of bringing everything together. I quite like that in the ending.
I think it works as a device. I don't know, I felt like it just sort of happened very quickly and mostly off screen in a way that I don't know, would have preferred to maybe see at least a little bit of it, but hey, I'm not an auteur director.
Well, I mean, if it didn't work for you, then that's entirely valid criticism. And it is, you're all right. A lot of stuff does happen off screen and things like that for quite a long film. And so, it's interesting. I suppose it was nominated for Best Picture, and I thought maybe in sort of a year with a lot of competition, maybe a lot of division, and being a well-respected film, it might. Part of me thought maybe it'll come through, but obviously, it was going to be one battle after another's year. But this, it's a worthy entry into the Best Picture nominees,
and it won Best International Picture, so he'll be okay.
Walked away with the prize in the night, which was good. And again, Joachim Trier's star continues to rise, and obviously he's now got Hollywood stars in his films as well. Hopefully it'll be interesting to see what he does next.
Yeah, no, definitely interesting. Glad I saw it. Okay, and that was Moderate Fantasy Violence for this fortnight. Thank you very much, as ever, for listening. If you have enjoyed this experience, then why not go to moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find out all about the podcasts we have done, all 265 of them, one at a time. And if you enjoy all that, then why not leave us a nice review? 5 stars, please.
And then after that, you can follow us on Blue Sky, where we are at MFV Podcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. Then you can get more from me on Blue Sky, Instagram or TikTok by searching for Alastair Ball. You can also find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com, or you can find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com, or subscribe to my newsletter The Post. Links in the bios of the above social medias.
And you can get more from me. I am at nickbryan.com on Blue Sky, although as of this recording, Blue Sky has been intermittently down all day. And also nickbryan.com on the internet. and nickbryan.com, but with the word dot written out, on Instagram, where I talk mostly about my self-published indie comics. Or you can come back in the very next episode, and speaking of comics, in the next one we will be covering the 4th season of Invincible, the Image Comics adaptation that we have usually enjoyed in the past, and speaking of podcast favourites, we will then be covering Aliens vs Avengers, the recent miniseries by podcast favourite Jonathan Hickman. See you in a couple of weeks for that. Bye-bye.
Bye.